Hello and welcome again to another exciting episode of Lost in Science across Australia on the Community Radio Network. This is half an hour where we get to talk about science and some weird science.
Science you would not believe.
Well, hopefully you do believe.
Yeah, you will believe it.
It
comes
is
from
real.
us. Yeah, it
It's
is
genuine, actual science that really happened.
That's right.
For sure.
But you definitely have to listen to the next half hour to really believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's going to be a good half hour. It's going
That's
to be,
true.
Yeah.
I'm going to be talking about a thing that probably people have never seen or possibly even heard of. I'm going to be talking about velvet worms.
Oh, it sounds like a character from a Tolkien novel. Velvet worm. Velvet
Yeah,
worm tongue.
It does sound a bit
I was
fantasy.
thinking like David Lynch more. I was going that angle.
Well, it could be that
Blue
too.
velvet.
The blue velvet
They're-
worm.
They're quite bizarre.
Yeah.
They are quite bizarre. And
Yeah.
Stay tuned to find out what is a velvet worm and why are they so unusual. Claire, speaking of bizarre fantasy topics,
That's right. I have a pretty bizarre fantasy topic for us today. It's about dragon blood and how dragon blood is going to help us slay microbes. By dragons, I mean Komodo dragons.
So actual dragons.
Actual
real
dragons.
dragons.
Real dragons, real blood, real slaying of microbes.
real microbes.
Real
Hashtag
microbes.
science. No, I did not just say hashtag science.
Chris, speaking of science,
Yeah.
what have you got for us today?
Well, actually, it turns out this is, I caught my attention because one of my favourite natural disasters, not artificial disasters in tragedies in history is the Great Molasses Flood of 1919. And it just so happens it ties into a story I did a couple of weeks ago with the frog spit. It's all about fluid dynamics. It's all about how fluids work and this sort of thing.
And is it another non-Newtonian fluid?
Oh, it is. Partially, yes.
Our favourite kinds of fluid.
Our favourite kinds of fluid, other non-Newtonian ones, yeah. So
This sounds like a sub-series on non-Newtonian fluids. Is this the direction you're heading?
it's an accidental direction, I suppose. But I'm normally a big fan of Newton, as you know. But I'm going a bit non-Newtonian. So
You're in your rebellious.
I am in my rebellious phase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oobleck will be next. I'll be talking about. Watch out for that one.
So you guys know what velvet is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Refresh my memory. Is it like velour?
Yeah, but it's like fancy velour.
Okay.
Yeah. I think velour is like a rip-off of velvet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Made of plastic. And you know what a worm is, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Worm. Yeah.
Yep.
You've seen worms.
I've seen worms.
But do you know what a velvet worm is?
Soft to the touch worm.
Yeah. I'm going with what she said.
Well, they're pretty amazing little creatures, but you've probably never seen one. Or if you have seen one, you probably didn't know what it was because they're kind of weird-looking critters. They look kind of like worms, but they're not actually worms. And they look kind of like centipedes, but they're not centipedes. And in fact, they're not even technically arthropods at all.
Where do they live?
They live in very moist places in rainforests and stuff.
Right.
Pretty much.
Do they live underground?
No, they live above the ground.
Damn it, I was going to make a velvet underground joke, but it totally didn't work.
Velvet overground.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where they live. But they're grouped with the arthropods in a taxonomic group called the Panarthropoda, which they basically invented to include these guys and one of their cousins, which I'll get to in a minute.
Pan normally just means like
Chimpanzee.
When it's by itself, it does.
just a very broad description of
Yeah.
a group.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So these velvet worms evolved about 500 million years ago on the supercontinent Gondwana. And that's obviously since split up due to artistic differences into different pieces including Australasia, Africa, and South America, where you can find velvet worms.
What
in
about
all of those
Zealandia,
places.
the new continent I was talking about?
Well, see that
last
the
week.
bit above the ground, the bit above the sea of Zealandia, just bubbled up relatively recently. It was a long time after.
Oh, so there aren't any velvet worms on Zealandia?
Probably not.
Okay. that's
Unless they got
interesting.
carried there somehow by a bird potentially.
A flightless bird.
Well, they
From
weren't
Zealand.
flightless when they got there. Anyway, so what are they? Their closest living relatives are pretty famous amongst fans of extremophiles. The tardigrades,
Water bear.
the water bears that can survive space travel without any help at all, are their nearest
Oh,
living
they need like
relatives.
a rocket to get them up there.
Well, yeah, but survive. Get there is
Okay,
one thing.
yeah,
But
yeah,
survive there. They don't
Yeah.
need spacesuits or
Yep, yeah, true, yeah.
pressurized capsules or anything like that.
Yeah.
But velvet worms are not as tough as tardigrades. They're also quite a bit bigger, so they're about 2 to 4 centimeters long.
They sound
sometimes
like
longer.
opposite of tough. They sound soft and delicate.
They are very soft and squishy, and they lose water very easily. So they kind of really need to stay in moist environments, which restricts them to pretty much to wet rainforests, effectively. And they do have what you would call legs, but they're not really like legs of insects because they don't have any hard exoskeleton. They're soft-bodied and flexible. And they move their legs by changing the internal pressure of the liquid inside them to move their legs around.
Like hydraulics kind of thing.
They are basically they have hydraulic legs, and that's how they walk around. And they're also pretty cute. Unfortunately, you can't see a picture of them, this being an audio format. But they are sort of fuzzy-looking and squishy-looking, like imagine if someone made a plush toy of a centipede.
Oh.
That's basically what they look like. They're kind of quite cute. But don't let this fool you. They are voracious predators
Oh, really?
of other insects.
Right. So how big are they?
Well, 2 to 4
2 to 4
centimeters.
centimeters.
Right.
on average, and some of them get a little bit bigger than that. But they hunt through the moist leaf litter, searching for insect prey to eat, and they capture them in a very specific and unusual fashion. They spit at them. They produce a special kind of super saliva or slime, or sort of like the stuff that Spider-Man squirts out of his wrists when he's like zipping around being Spider-Man. But it's not web. It's more like super glue.
Oh.
So this gluey slime dries really quickly and hardens in the air and traps the other insect in this slimy, blobby glue stuff that dries really quickly. And then the worm just kind of wanders along.
Worm
and,
just takes its time after that.
Yeah, it takes its time, bites off bits of the insect that's trapped and eats it as it's sitting there
Just
trapped.
changes a bit of its pressure and waddles over.
Yeah, I don't think they're very fast moving.
No.
But their gluey super saliva spit is very fast moving. So it's pretty cold blooded. They eat their prey while they're still alive, except they don't really have any blood, so they're just kind of cold all the time, I guess. But in some species of velvet worms, the hunting is a team effort. So like tiny prides of little wormy lions, they hunt in groups.
What?
And combining their slime squirts to catch larger prey, which an alpha female coordinates and gets her first pick of the smorgasbord.
Whoa.
So like a pride of lions.
Like
you
a pride
say.
of lions.
So they can bring down a wildebeest.
Well,
Yeah, but
probably
in a-
maybe a beetle.
Right.
Yeah, and a pride of lions doesn't have an alpha female. They always have an alpha male.
Well, although the hunting's mostly done by females.
Yeah, that's true, but I don't think they get the first.
Speaking of females, the female velvet worms only give birth pretty much once in their lives in most species, and they can either lay eggs, where the little velvet worms hatch out later, or they carry their young to be born live births as well,
Wow.
depending on which species. So I just discovered these things the other day when I was, learning about weird animals of the world.
have you ever seen one in the wild?
I have never seen one in the wild, and like the ones in Australia are mostly sort of brown and black and blend into their, leaf litter environment. So you'd have to be
Really
looking
know what
for
you were
it
looking for.
to find one. But some of the ones in other parts of the world are bright coloured with blue and yellow stripes and purple and green and all these other weird different colours. So if you ever saw one and you didn't think it quite looked like an insect and you didn't really know what it was, it's probably a velvet worm.
They're the kind of thing that you hear about when there's like one of those big sort of bio-blitz when they do it like in an area, they look at all the different species there and they all usually find new species of velvet worms because these things are around and people don't often realise
Yeah,
they're there.
they think there's probably a couple of hundred species of velvet worms that have never been described because they're hard to find and don't live where anything else that people are looking for actually lives. So there they are. Velvet worms are probably the cutest, grossest, most vicious killers you've never heard of. Keep an eye out next time you're in the rainforest.
So I think Game of Thrones had it right, you know, and all those other fantasy books. When we go searching for new ways to heal ourselves, the first place we should look is in the mystical creatures, in the dragon blood.
I would probably go for the unicorn blood first of all.
Unicorn blood is supposed to be very good.
It is,
But,
it is.
but
All
there
right.
are no unicorns.
There are no
so-
unicorns, but there are dragons on Earth, specifically Komodo dragons. And researchers have just published a study in the Journal of Proteome Research reporting that they've detected antimicrobial protein fragments in the Komodo dragon's blood that appear to help the lizards resist some very deadly infections. This is very exciting.
This is interesting because, I'm sure you're going to like tell us the truth all about the
I'm gonna
Komodo
tell you the
dragon
truth.
spit. But like people have long said that the Komodo dragons have a lot of bacteria in their spit.
That's
and that's why
right.
they're deadly.
Yeah.
But is that not true?
No. That this is all true.
Ah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, just thinking about new drugs, if these Komodo dragons can resist deadly infections, then hopefully we're going to be able to utilize this research to find some new antibiotics, which is pretty amazing. So yeah, Chris, do you want me to tell you a little bit about Komodo dragons?
I would love you to.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. They're also quite terrifying.
There's not one in this room though, so I'm feeling quite relaxed.
All right, okay. They're the world's largest lizard,
Right.
and they live on 5 small islands in Indonesia. Komodo being one of those islands that they live on.
Okay, so when you say world's largest lizard,
When I say world's largest lizard, I mean the largest reported dragon was 3.5 meters.
Wow.
And about 166 kgs. It's pretty big.
that is pretty big.
That's pretty big. 3.5 meters.
Twice my size.
Oh, Jesus. That's big. Normally they're around 70 odd kilos though.
Okay.
And the males tend to be a little bit bigger than the females. The really remarkable thing about Komodos though is how they kill their prey. And it isn't what you would expect. So sure, they do a lot of biting and scratching and thrashing and all that sort of stuff that you would normally see.
I mean,
in
they're basically
such-
a land crocodile.
in such large reptilian species of land crocodile. Different group though, taxonomy.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Let's not confuse the issue.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, good. But the really scary thing about them is their saliva, because it's seriously toxic. It contains at least 57 species of bacteria. And like you were suggesting, this is supposedly how they kill their prey. So each Komodo dragon has these tooth serrations, these quite serrated teeth. And being giant lizards, they can't clean their teeth effectively. So when they eat bits of meat or carrion or whatever they're eating, some of that meat gets stuck in their teeth, which provides this rich sort of protein junk, which is the perfect sustenance for all sorts of bacteria living in their mouth. researchers have found that at least 7 of these 57 bacteria species are highly septic. So we're talking your big guns of bacteria, like your Staph aureus, your golden staphs.
So I guess, I mean, really, if there's bacteria that's in their mouth because there's bits of flesh in their mouth and the bacteria is living on the flesh, it is literally flesh-eating bacteria. That's why it's there.
But it doesn't attack them.
Well, isn't that why we're...
That's why we're... Yeah. So that's
so this is about how they protect themselves from their own
how
bacteria.
They protect themselves. But just to go back. So you're attacked by a Komodo dragon. You're bitten on the leg. Stu, you don't have much time. Somehow you manage to outmaneuver the lizard, but unfortunately the bite will probably kill you in around a week just because of this septic bacteria. It's not looking good for you.
So I don't get in a boat and find a hospital, or I'm shipwrecked. Let's just say
You're
I'm shipwrecked
on Komodo. You don't have much time.
My mobile's out of credit.
Yeah, and I mean, living on islands, this is pretty advantageous for them because they live on an island. So there's only so many places that their prey can run to before they get septic leg and then fall over and can't get up.
We've all seen Jurassic Park. We know how that works.
But when they fight each other, when Komodo dragons fight each other, their bites are not deadly, suggesting they've got something really interesting going on in their blood, which mounts this immune response and something that we might be able to harness, which is what the researchers have done. This is where the dragon blood research comes in,
right?
Obviously. So in the blood of nearly all living things, there are these sort of small peptide fragments called cationic antimicrobial peptides, and they're part of the innate immune system. So this is pretty much what keeps you alive in the 2 or 3 weeks. If a bacteria gets into your system, it's what keeps you alive until your body has time to make some antibodies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is sort of like innate immunity, first line, before you can...
First line defense against things just randomly
Is that first
popping
line
up.
Or is first line like your skin?
Well, I guess your skin.
Second line, but your innate immunity anyway. So the researchers took the plasma from the blood of the dragons and analysed it with these newly developed techniques that use nanoparticles to capture these peptides from the blood. And from this bioprospecting, their word, not mine, but a great word, bioprospecting, sounds like sifting through blood to find small pieces of gold to me.
Just imagine some guy
peptide
with a pick going, I'm staking my claim to this.
And this here dragon blood. There be dragon blood in these heroes. Yeah.
Great word though.
Yeah.
Anyway, so from this bioprospecting, they were able to identify and capture 48 potential peptides that they thought were quite important. And then they discovered that from these 48 peptides, 47 of them were derived from histone proteins, which are known to have antimicrobial properties. They then synthesized 8 of these peptides and tested them against 2 particularly nasty kinds of bacteria. So the Staph aureus, or the golden staph, your multiple resistant Staph aureus that I was talking about, and also your Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is pretty nasty as well. If you Google those 2, then some really awful photos turn up in Google Image.
They're ugly bacteria?
No. What they do to humans is ugly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Flesh-eating stuff.
Yeah, awful. Anyway, with these 8 synthesized peptides, 7 of them were effective at killing both of the bacteria in lab-grown cultures, while one of them was effective against the aeruginosa specifically, but not the Staph aureus, which is pretty amazing considering how, that we don't really have that many antibiotics left that are effective against some of these bacteria. So it's early days at the moment, but researchers hope that future studies of the peptides can lead to new classes of antibiotics, which can potentially slay these deadly superbugs just like dragons.
I'm Maggie Adair Pocock, and you're listening to Lost in Science on 3CR.
All right, so yes, as I was saying, one of my favourite odd disasters in history is the Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919. Have you guys heard of this?
I have.
I have actually,
I've
but
seen
only
some-
recently.
Yeah?
Yeah, on a TV show.
It's been around a while. It happened
Well,
Has it-
nearly
has it been-
100 years, in
nearly
fact.
100 years,
Right.
yeah. But it's got some attention because there's been some more analysis lately about the what contributed, why it was so deadly, and the physics behind it. And, I love to talk about the physics that is behind everything. And I'm a bit on a going with the flow of fluid dynamics at the moment. So, I would sort of make bad puns about that. I could see that didn't work, so I'm going to move on. Anyway, so for those who don't know, the Great Boston Molasses Flood, of course, happened in the city of Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. It was on the 15th of January, 1919, about 12:40 p.m. It was this,
lunchtime.
yeah, there was this enormous tank of molasses, 50-meter high tank of molasses. And it burst, basically, and there was a wall of molasses that poured out. It was described as being 8 meters high and said to be moving at about 56 kilometers per hour.
Whoa.
So it's pretty quick.
That is very fast. You
It's
cannot
faster
run
than
that
a car.
fast. You cannot run
No.
that fast, you. It killed 21 people and injured 150 more. So it's one of those things that does sound like it's kind of a funny at first, and then you realise people died. But don't worry, all the victims are long dead, so don't worry about that.
Well, they died in 1919, the victims.
I guess they did.
Yeah. So the survivors might be also long gone too.
The description from the New York Times said, a dull, muffled roar gave but an instant warning before the top of the tank was blown into the air. 2 million gallons of molasses rushed over the streets and converted into a sticky mass the wreckage of several small buildings which had been smashed by the force of the explosion. Wagons, carts and motor trucks were overturned. A number of horses were killed. The street was strewn with debris intermixed with molasses and all traffic was stopped. The Boston Post reported that the molasses was waist deep, it was swirling and bubbling about the wreckage. So it was a pretty bizarre and frightening scene.
Is this the only molasses-related disaster that's ever happened?
That I'm aware of. There was a London beer flood in about 1814 from a tank of beer that burst
Right,
and it
okay.
killed about 8 people.
Yeah, but I mean, I imagine the fluid dynamics of beer are a bit more predictable than...
Yeah, well, particularly in this case, because people have wondered, because January in Boston is fairly cold, I guess, and molasses is fairly thick. I don't know if you're familiar with molasses.
Can I
sticky,
just ask
sugary
a question?
substance.
What is molasses?
It is basically it's kind of a product of what you get out of sugar, essentially. The sugar syrup, you get this real thick goo, and it's used to it's used to make alcohol often, like rum is made from molasses, but ethanol and that sort of thing, which of course has many industrial uses, and that seems to be the main reason that they had a big tank of molasses.
Right.
In
So they were
Boston at the
storing
time.
it for use in manufacturing.
Yeah,
something.
it was the United States Industrial Alcohol Company. It was that owned the tank. So the question is, how did this actually happen? And there's been some work done recently, presented at the conferences of the American Physical Society and the American Association for Advancement of Science by a fluid dynamicist called Nicole Sharp. She runs a Tumblr blog. Can I say rude words on Lost in Science?
Just be warned that there may be some rude words.
Some bleeping out. It's called Fuck Yeah Fluid Dynamics is her blog, because she is a big fan of fluid dynamics.
That was worth it.
And anyway, she and her colleagues, they've tried to figure out what exactly happened, and they've tried to recreate the conditions. What they actually did was they went into a cold storage unit. They had a little scale model of the area, and they poured cornstarch to substitute for the molasses to see how it would flow, and then they did calculations and scaled it up to work out exactly what had happened. So look, what basically the thing that happened there is this was this great big tank, enormous tank, as I said, and there's a lot of weight of molasses. So even though molasses normally flows very, very slowly, when there's a lot of weight behind it, things are a bit different. So this initial flow, it's what's called a gravity current. And basically what happens when a heavy fluid, in this case molasses, flows into a lighter fluid, in this case air. And you kind of get it. It's kind of, there's this free flowing as a big kind of, it's normally a horizontal flow like that. It's basically the same as a lava flow or an avalanche, or as they've described, the cold air that comes in under the door. So it's like the denser cold air flowing under the
Sometimes
the
it's
warm
like
air.
an avalanche of air.
It is like an avalanche of air. So yes, this created a fast-moving molasses tsunami that Nicole Sharp estimates would have lasted about 30 to 60 seconds. So fairly quick, but it's moving at 56 kilometres an hour or 15 metres per second. They can get a fair way in that time. And now, but what turns out the molasses is also, it's a shear thinning fluid like the frog spit we discussed a couple of weeks ago. Do you remember how the frog spit worked? This is like a frog's sticky tongue, and what it does, like when the spit hits something, it's moving fast. It reduces its viscosity and flows over quickly. But then when it stops, viscosity increases and it becomes very sticky. A bit like velvet worm spit as well, if you want to picture that, as you've just heard about. This is what basically happened with the molasses. It flowed very fast as in initial stages. However, it did also, the cold also had an effect. And when the temperature drops, the viscosity increases markedly. And this turns out to be possibly the cause of most of the problems, is that basically it flowed everywhere and then it was very thick and people got stuck in it. There's one particular story about a group of firefighters. They're in their firehouse that was basically knocked down by the molasses, and then they were trapped for hours, and took hours to reach them. Most of them survived, but one of them, basically, it was about 2 hours or more that he tried to stay up, and ultimately he drowned because it was just, he couldn't keep the molasses away, and the rescuers couldn't get to them because the molasses was so thick. People were just stuck in it. So that is like fluid dynamics is a secret of the molasses peril, the terror. They're still trying to figure out what made the tank actually burst. There are some various theories. Might have been a mixing of warmer molasses that they poured in with the cold molasses. Let's talk about fermentation. There's also poor tank manufacture. Apparently the tank was very leaky and poor construction. The manufacturer painted it brown so that people wouldn't notice the molasses leaking, basically, which clearly was not a suitable kind of substitute for actually fixing the thing. But the Great Molasses Flood, it left Boston sticky for a long time, as you can imagine. And some people today claim that on hot days you can still smell the molasses in that part of town. I don't know whether that's true or not, but
check it out next
it
time
sticks
you're in
around.
Boston.
Yeah.
Not such a sweet story, Chris.
No, sorry, Stu.
That's all we've got time for on this episode of Lost in Science. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne and broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the financial assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. If you want to talk to us, talk back to us, you can get in touch. We have a Gmail account, lostinsci@gmail. You can also find us on Twitter and on the Facebook. And if that's not enough Lost in Science for you, you can always tune in again next week, where the team will once again get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.